As you can imagine, as of Monday, there was information provided that has given us the opportunity to kind of redefine some of the components of our reentering plan, which we'll have an opportunity this evening to discuss. But before we begin, I wanted to give our Madam Chair an opportunity to welcome everyone and say a few words.
For sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Estrella. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, and thank everyone so much for your hard work on all of these plans that we're making. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being here as well. I just wanted to briefly remind everybody, and it may seem like that this is the sort of thing that I generally tend to say, but I wanted to remind everybody, parents at home and members of the community, that we really are all living through something that nobody has ever lived through before. There have been pandemics before, but never in the age of social media. There have been movements for social change before, but never in the middle of a pandemic. So we're all feeling a lot of anxiety. We're living in a very uncertain time. And I just wanted to remind everyone that we're here to work with each other and to work for each other and to take care of each other. And I also wanted to just clarify for the members of the public, because this is something that's sort of, you know, it's new for a lot of people to be this involved in procedure and practice, that the board itself is a mechanism for oversight of the plans, but that it's not our job to devise them. So we're here to listen as well. And I would then just turn things back over to Dr. Estrella and thank everyone again for being here.
Thank you. Before we begin, I know Mayor Rilling is here. I don't know if he wishes to say a few words before we begin as well. Mayor Rilling?
Well, thank you, Dr. Estrella, and officially welcome aboard. I know I've had the opportunity to welcome you unofficially, but certainly on a town hall meeting is the appropriate thing to do. I want to thank you for your leadership. I understand that you're coming on board at a very, very challenging time. We've dealt with a lot of different things that we've never dealt with before, and there's no manual for this. We're writing this manual on a daily basis. But I do thank you for holding this town hall meeting. I want the public to know that it is the city's position that we will work very closely with you and your staff to make sure that not only are we going to be able to provide to continue to provide a world-class education to our children, but we are going to do so in a safe environment, making sure that we take all things into consideration. We've had some discussions recently about how that can happen. They will continue, and when we put together the final product, we'll make sure that we do that with a view towards keeping our children safe, our staff safe, and still being able to provide a great education. So thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this.
Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate having you here. So just to make sure that the public understands the way we're going to conduct a town hall, I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to be sharing just to guide the conversation. The Q&A will open shortly, where you can post questions that you would like to have answered through the Q&A. As of right now, the information we're providing is accurate as of July 29, 2020 at 5:35 p.m. And I say that because, as you know, we created a reopening plan that was submitted July 24th. And that plan is currently outdated given the new information we received July 27th, 2020 from the mayor and commissioner. So I just want to preface that before we begin the conversation. I also want to preface that this plan is contingent upon funding from our state. And one of the things it's really important is that we're looking to work collaboratively with the state to ensure that it doesn't become the Norwalk taxpayers' responsibility to provide the resources necessary to engage in this reopening plan. So we're working collaboratively with our legislative officials and board members so that they can support us in advocating to the state. I have been in conversations with the state as well, so that we ensure that they have clarity around the resources we're going to need to have a safe reopening for our children. So I think it's important to preface that. because of the conditions in which we're working under right now and the ever evolving process that we have engaged in. So I'm going to share my screen at this point. Ralph, please confirm that everybody can see the PowerPoint.
Yes, people can. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So like I articulated, we put forward a plan July 24th. At this point, that plan is in the process of being revised because we have acquired more local autonomy in terms of how we outline the plan. For us, this has been really important and a valuable opportunity because originally, in the original plan, we were very limited in terms of what we could do in terms of providing adequate social distancing amongst our different classrooms, given the density within our schools in terms of the number of students we are currently serving. So I want to point that out because I think it's important for those of you who have read the proposal to understand that the model that you're going to see today is a little different than what you have read in this document. The other piece that I think is really important to articulate is that we got guidance from the state that we can reduce our school year from 180 to 177 school days for students, giving us 3 additional days that we can engage our staff in professional learning opportunities. We have decided as a result of that to move our student first day of school to Tuesday, September 1st, 2020, to give us 1 full day in which we can provide professional learning opportunities for teachers as they're acclimating into the new model that we will present shortly, but also giving them time to organize and sort out their space in preparation for student arrival. The additional 2 days that we have flexibility upon, we want to hold on to in case conditions around COVID change and we need to switch from our hybrid model that we're going to introduce to full distance learning. We want to make sure that students as well as personnel have an opportunity to prepare for the shift if that's unnecessary. So for the time being, we have not set dates in how we're going to use those 2 additional flex days because we want to keep those on hold in case we need to have transition within the school year as a result of different COVID spread conditions. So originally in our education plan, we had talked about having all students come back unless parents decided to choose to keep them in distance learning. Right now, we are combining the minimal COVID spread, the yellow, and the orange stages, which is the moderate COVID spread, and combining them to create the current model that we're going to be looking at today in terms of how we're hoping to proceed moving forward. In this hybrid model, we would have only 50% of the student population that was expected to be in a classroom in the room. So if a class had 24 students in normal conditions, in this case, we would have 9 to 12 students on average, depending on the square footage of the space and what that space allow us to do, right? So the goal is that every child will have 6 feet of distance from one another so that we can adequately socially distance them in this model. Also, to keep note in this model, students will, because of the fact that we're only keeping half of the class in one room, we would have one cohort of students in two different rooms. And depending on the school, that might look differently because they might have more open space and other conditions that might allow them to keep the cohort together. But in places that we aren't able to keep the cohorts together, we would have the certified teacher in one room and a para-educator in another room with the rest of the cohort, providing support while the teacher is providing the learning experience through Zoom using a digital device. In that model, the teacher will swap through the different periods so that students will have 50% of the time the certified teacher with them and 50% of the time the para-educator, to ensure that students have enough face time with their instructor while they're in the building. Now, depending on how many students decide to re-register to be in person, we might not necessarily have to do that. But in the case that we have a significant number of students requesting live instruction, that is the model that we are looking to transition into.
Dr.
I'm gonna-
Estrella, do you
yes.
mind if I ask a clarifying question just for members of the public really briefly?
Absolutely.
So the board has already gotten a couple of emails saying that we hear the district is starting on orange. And I just wanted to clarify that it's a new model that combines elements of both yellow and orange that we're moving forward with. It's not any of the pre-existing models that we had. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So it's not the pre-existing model. And one of the things I want to be careful when we use the color coding is really associated around the spread of the virus, not the model that we're using. We created the arrows in this diagram just to show that we have a hybrid of the two in terms of what teaching and learning is going to look like. But in reality, the model that we're talking about now is our yellow model, because the amount of communal spread is still considerably low relative to other places. And I think that a little bit of confusion has emerged because people are associating the model with the color, and the color is really not associated with the model, but the conditions of spreading. So I think it's important to articulate that.
Thank you.
I want to turn it over to Dr. Myers at this point to speak a little bit about the electives and how the electives will be rolled out under this model. Dr. Myers?
Hi. I'm just checking. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So one of the things we've been looking at is how we actually maintain all of our related arts and how we maintain them in a cohort model. And what used to happen in our areas or specials is we would often have students would have phys ed one day, art the next, and music the next. But that would give overexposure to an individual teacher and might not keep students in their cohort. So what we're doing, for example, in a third grade classroom, all of the third grades might have the art teacher for a 2-week cycle. And so they'd still be getting their related art, but the art teacher would only be working with third grade.
Thank you. So if we then, in terms of communal spread, transition into a high COVID spread, we will then transition to full remote learning. One of the things that we're looking into is the possibility, even if we have high communal spread, in providing some form of childcare for essential workers throughout the community. And it could be in the form of a rec center in collaboration with some of our partners like Carver. So we will be engaging in deeper conversations with our community partners so that we ensure that even in a situation where we have high COVID spread, we have resources available for our essential workers so that their children have a place in which they can continue engaging in their learning experiences, but also have that opportunity in a safe environment. And if anybody has been following some organizations like the YMCA who have been engaging in this practice, those models have been pretty successful. So it just merits the opportunity for us to further look into that opportunity as we continue to develop and design our plan. So just to break down what the model will look like in the different grade bands. So in order to ensure that our elementary school students, which benefit, have the biggest struggle engaging in distance learning, we are looking at having kindergarten, pre-K to 5th grade in person every day unless parents choose otherwise. In doing that, we are looking at the capacity of each building. So principals right now are working collaboratively with their teams to identify all available spaces to ensure how much space they have in their buildings to bring in ideally grades K-3 in their buildings. We might have to, for grades 4 to 5, have them receive their learning in a different building. Because given the fact that we're now splitting classes in half, the amount of real estate required to do that is duplicated. So in order for us to find adequate space to do that, we might have to use other buildings throughout the district. And as a result of that, it will impact what the model will look like for middle school as well as high school. So ideally, depending on the number of kids coming in for elementary school, we are looking to have a hybrid model for middle and high school, space permitting. If we don't have adequate space to do that, we would first look at middle school, how many kids we could, or how many grades we could have in a hybrid model. And we will work from grade 6, moving up 7, 8 to high school to fill up the available space as much as we possibly can. But that will all be determined based on how many kids re-register for reopening in person. And if there's not enough space, then the older children will then be in distance learning 100% of the time under this model.
Do you mind if I just take that moment to encourage everyone who's watching to complete that re-registration form that came in the email? Because the more information we have, the more information you will have as far as what we're able to accomplish.
Correct. So the way that we move forward in terms of what middle and high school will look like highly depends on enrollment numbers and how many students obviously will be in person. So our goal is that by August 7, we will have the registration, everybody re-register in the district. We really need every single family to complete the form for us to have a solid, accurate number of how many students we have coming in and how much available space we have to create the adequate social distancing necessary with the space requirements that we have set. Because the other piece that we're looking at is having some of our students with special needs, as well as English language learners that are recent arrivals, engage in learning 5 days a week in person, especially because we want to make sure that we meet their diverse learning needs. And Yvette will speak a little bit more about that model and what that means. Yvette, do you want to speak a little bit to that piece now?
Sure, thank you. Brenda, do you have that slide?
1 minute, I'll pull it out.
Alex, do you mind while we're waiting for Yvette, can you just, is it possible to resend the re-registration form out to families since they're now much more aware of what we're looking for? Is that possible to do that? Just as a suggestion?
Say that
to
again?
Re-register? If we could send out to families again to re-register? The
Yes.
re-registration process?
We'll send
Okay,
it.
I think that would be a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Good
But
evening.
it hasn't gone out yet, so we will make sure to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So we serve 1,800 students with special education needs, pre-K through age 21. Of those 1,800, 1,400 of those students spend the great majority of their day, over 80% of their day, in general education classrooms with supports and services. Those children, all children, are looked at as general education children first. So students will be grouped in cohorts in general education classrooms, and special education staff will be assigned to those classrooms to deliver IEP services and supports. We will limit the number of classrooms that each special educator will be working in on any given day. It looks like we have staffing at this point to be able to limit it to 2 classes with grouping. Children with severe disabilities who spend their time in special schools or in special education classrooms will form their own cohort with all their support services in those classrooms, with opportunities for very targeted mainstreaming opportunities according to their IEPs. The second guiding principle is the federal government has provided no flexibility with regard to the district's responsibilities around all aspects of compliance with special education laws and regulations. So as superintendent indicated, we're putting a priority on provision of access to 5-day-a-week in-person instruction for those students with intense special education needs whose parents opt into in-person service. Goals and hours on the IEPs will be adhered to. As of July 6th, we have begun our evaluations in person again. Our IEP meetings have continued throughout COVID closure. So we have continued to adhere to those compliance requirements ahead of timetables that require it, because we know that our families are anxious about ensuring that the supports and services are available when we reopen. And finally, our guiding principle is that our kids have felt isolated. They've reported to us feeling anxious, feeling confused, feeling concerned, feeling all the things, and we are validating all of their feelings because we're feeling it as well. So we recognize that social and emotional supports are critical. All students, whether they are learning in a hybrid model, in person or remotely, will have daily social and emotional learning supports embedded into their everyday learning. We have accessed all of the resources that we've begun to build capacity for and will continue to support the rollout. And we've, working with our community partners, have increased our opportunities for training around trauma-informed care, with special consideration for our families who may not speak English, so that we are ensuring communication across our community. So thank you so much, and we miss our kids and look forward to seeing them very soon.
Thank you, Yvette.
Dr. Estrella, do you mind if I just highlight 2 things that I have heard concerns from parents about already, just so that because we're all hearing a lot of information and it's very thorough and excellent, and I just want to bullet point 2 things, if that's
Absolutely.
okay. Number 1, that there's a consistent schedule and the same assigned teacher, even if risk levels change. So even if we move in between teaching models or in between in-person and remote instruction, children will still be with their same teachers. And also just below that, that even if grades for elementary school are in a different location, they'll still be with their friends and their teachers that they know.
Correct.
I just have heard concerns about that, and I wanted to just highlight those 2 things.
So one of the things, like I articulated, one of the reasons why we're looking at the space allocation in the building and how many of the students we can keep in one consistent place, a lot of the challenges around available space come about because we're prioritizing that our children stay with the same cohort at all times, regardless of how they're transitioning from in-person to remote instruction. To us, is really important for the social well-being of our children that they have the same teacher and the same group of students that they're building relationships and friendships with throughout the school year. So as we thought about mapping out the plan and organizing the cohort, that is why we have the same teacher engaging in person as well as live instruction, and having students work in digital platforms even while they're in the classroom, so that they have the opportunity to build relationships, form partnerships with their peers, as well as have a consistent instructor throughout their learning experience. For the middle school and high school, the same thing applies. The difference at the high school level, obviously, is because the coursework is so specialized and differentiated, students will just be assigned to the different courses that they will be engaging in. And they will not be in a cohort in the high school level because of the variation in programming that they would have to engage in order to fulfill the high school requirements. Some of the things that I want to point out as you look at this diagram and look at the components across is that when it comes to the electives, we're trying to make sure at the elementary and middle school level that students are cohorted in this biweekly model that Brenda had articulated before. But also that the enrichments that are being offered in any form of after-school activities, particularly at the middle school level, is being provided by NPS staff only, because we want to limit any external entities coming in contact with our students so that we can contact trace who they've been interacting on a continuous and ongoing basis. In terms of the high school students, and after school will only be available for those days that they have in person for the middle school. A little bit different for the high school students because they are participating in more structured and formal sport activities. Students, even if they're in a remote setting, we're looking to provide sports in an ongoing basis. The challenge with that is that we have to now think about how do we engage in transportation opportunities for students to come to and from these activities, because we want to make sure that whatever we decide upon is equitable for students regardless of resources, right? So this is a piece that, depending on state funding, might or might not fluctuate from what I'm describing right now, because a lot of it is going to be based in terms of how many buses we can have available to engage in the transportation of our students.
Dr. Estrella, can I ask you just a brief question about this? If I start, okay, about the element and
Heidi, you're cutting
for
out.
art and music or art and music teacher.
Sorry, you're cutting off.
You hear me or see me?
Yes, but you're sort of glitching in and out a
Okay.
little bit.
All right.
Maybe if you
Okay.
turn off
Can you
your,
see me now or hear me now?
say it again.
Can you hear me now or see me?
Yes, I hear you now and see you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, both things. Just briefly, back to the elementary level for music and art and gym. Will our music and art teacher come to these classes, to our cohorts? And for gym, are we looking more for an outdoor experience for our children for gym?
So physical education would, as much as we possibly can, will take place outside.
Right.
Practicing social distancing as well as recess. We want to make sure that kids have adequate movement opportunities. So those opportunities will happen outdoors and applying social distancing rules. We are learning a lot from what other countries that have successfully reopened and what they've done. So I know the task force have been looking at some of those models and what activities could look like in those situations. So when we have a more defined outline of what that will look like, we will definitely share it with the rest of the public, but it's going to happen outdoors.
Okay, and is that including also possibly art and music, weather permitting, and if it's, you know, if that's something that we could possibly do? I know we're looking at other countries.
We're looking at providing those in a remote setting versus in person. Okay. For the time being.
All right, thank you.
No problem. So in terms of remote learning options, one of the things that we are keeping into consideration, that because we have to be so thoughtful in terms of looking at how many kids are going to be in live instruction, the available space that we will have to accommodate we're going to be asking parents to work with us in terms of their desires to make any shifts within the school year. So those students that opt to engage in live instruction and wish to transition into distance learning can do that at any point, because that won't impact any shifting of cohorts into different spaces if the population size increases significantly. But for families that choose distance learning and would like to then transition into live instruction, we're looking at 2 different scenarios, and we haven't really finalized as a task force what would be the better option. And we would love to hear from the community their thoughts around this. But we're looking at either making it marking period based. So parents will need to notify us 2 weeks prior to the end of a marking period saying that they're interested in having their kids return to live instruction. So that will give us adequate amount of time to plan and organize any shifts that need to happen. Or we can look at any point in time, 2 weeks notice. The feedback that I've gotten in terms of these 2 opportunities from the leadership in the district is the concern of spending the time that they would like to spend in classroom supporting teachers. They might have to spend it constantly having to readjust the plan to accommodate new students rolling in within the marking period. So to make it more manageable for the leadership in the district, it might make more sense to do the marking period model, but it's something that we as a task force have been engaging in some constructive debate around what would be the better option. But right now, we're looking at a minimum, providing 2 weeks notice to the schools so that they have adequate planning time to safely bring back students back into the in-person environment.
Dr. Estrella, do you mind if I jump in for 1 second? I'm just taking a look at the questions and answers that are coming through the chat. And I know we're going to have a way that those will be addressed if they haven't been addressed afterwards, but many of them have to do with the registration form, the re-registration form. So just to address all of those questions about if people didn't get the form, when is the form coming, and that sort of thing. There are maybe 15 or 16 questions about the form.
I'm gonna turn it over to Brenda Williams, and she will address those questions if you don't mind.
Fantastic.
So we're going to jump to the last slide here, if we can. We do have one on that.
You want me to move to the last slide?
Yeah, jump to the last slide. We'll just jump ahead because we were going to talk about.
Oh God, sorry. Here we go.
So we will be sending out the re-registration form via school messenger, which is the same way you get notifications from us on a regular basis. It will not be a general link. It will be direct to you for your individual students with your individual student names. So
I'm sorry, Brenda, you're really soft.
Yeah, it's hard to hear Brenda. I don't know if she could speak just a little bit louder.
How's that? Is that better?
Is your microphone on, Brenda?
Yep.
Oh, now it is. Okay,
Now I
there
can
we
hear
go.
you. Yeah,
Okay.
that's better. Thank
No,
you.
I'm on the phone, so I'll start over again. So we are going to be sending it out via school messenger, which is the way that you all typically receive information and blasts from us, whether it's a weather notification or another message. It will be delivered to you per student, so it will not be a general link. It will be attached to your database in the Power School system so that we can make sure that we get it filled out for every student in our system. And it will be an online form. It's about 6 questions long, and it will ask you specifically as a parent or guardian to choose the in-person or the remote option for each particular student in your household. We will follow up with folks who do not return it right away. We do need 100% participation in order to plan appropriately as we go into the school year. So we are hoping that everybody will jump on it as soon as you see it in your email and return it as soon as possible so that we don't have to follow up with phone calls to you. So Okay.
Brenda, is the
So it has
deadline
not,
August 7th?
Yep. It has not gone out yet. I just want to clarify that because I know there's a lot of
Right.
questions on YouTube and here as well. It has not
Sure.
gone out yet, but look for it starting Friday.
And there are a couple of parents who have actually put email addresses in the chat. So let's just tell everyone that we have to, the email address to email if you feel like you're not getting information or to be put on
Correct.
the list
So,
of information.
if you are not getting information, then you need to contact your school directly to make sure your information is correct in the Power School database. So that's the process for any communication, to make sure that your information is always up to date in the Power School database. I will say that there are registrations that are still in progress, whether you're an incoming kindergarten parent or a parent of a student who is newly registering in any grade. So we do have some of them in the system, but it's still a work in progress, as it typically is over the course of the summer. So we will be reaching out in separate ways to those individuals. But we will ask principals as well to reach out. And if you do have any questions and you're not getting it, you should touch base with your building principal and they will help you out.
For sure. Okay. So bullet
Okay.
point, get in touch with your
The other
principal
piece
if
that
you're
I'd
not
like to
getting
add-
emails.
Oh, sorry. The other piece I would like to add, Brenda, is also that we're creating a cohort of district personnel that will be working towards communicating with parents on an individual basis to make sure that they complete the form, or if they're facing any challenges, that they have someone from the district or the school directly communicating with them to support them in the process. So our goal is not only just to put the reopening registration form out, but also being very active in contacting families that have not completed the survey as well, because our goal is to have 100% of our families complete the survey by August 7, because that will then give us the time we need to repurpose the space, know how many students we will have in, and provide more definite information around the middle and high school model, given the number of students that we have enrolled in pre-K through 5th grade. I'm also working, like I said, with the city about looking at other potential spaces for our early, for our pre-K students, as well as looking at the possibility of using the old Jefferson building as a backfill where necessary if we run out of space in other buildings in the district. So, one second. Sorry. So I'm going to turn it now over to Dr. Costanza to speak a little bit about some of the safety measures and protocols that we put in place. I'm going to ask Sandra Fayos to also partner with him in going through this component of the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Estrella. We have, as a superintendent alluded to earlier in this presentation, have considered the student health and safety to be the #1 priority for the Norwalk Public Schools in this reopening plan. The great deal of work that's gone into this is evident in what you see here in front of you, and then also the experiences that we've had in our summer school program. This first slide is really talking about reducing the possibility of spreading COVID-19 within the community. And the best ways to do this, according to health experts, include adequately providing physical distance between the individuals that are in the building. And our school principals are hard at work designing those social distancing desk configurations as we speak. And the central office is meeting with principals on a weekly basis to take a look at those plans, one school at a time, one classroom at a time. Another great mitigator of the COVID-19 spread is frequent hand washing. And We know, particularly with our younger students, the need to wash hands frequently throughout the day is really paramount in mitigating the spread. And so we're looking at a number of different options. We start with the basics, making sure that we're utilizing classrooms with sinks. We're looking at the potential for to bring in portable sinks in some cases, and generally making this part of the new norm culture. Teachers and paras and adults speaking about the need to clean hands and hand washing before mealtime is critically important. The district's guidance from our local health director and medical advisor, the indication is very clear that we need to hold the line on use of masks and face wear among students and staff. So we plan to do that. We've done that in summer school, and the results have been positive.
Dr. Costanzo, do you mind if I pop in right there to just say one thing?
Sure.
I'm in looking at the questions and answers, and as they're coming across, and also in just having participated in a faculty meeting at the school where I teach, I think it's important to help everybody get on the same page about assimilating new information, right? Because at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic and crisis, there were certain things that were said by medical officials, and over time, as we've learned more about the virus and how it spread, information has changed. I'm thinking in particular of masks, and how at the beginning of the pandemic, regular people were told not to wear masks, but we later found out that that was so that there would be enough for healthcare personnel. And now the guidance is very clear, the science is very clear that masks work and that they're safe and that they're one of the best tools that we have to prevent the spread. So sorry for that very lengthy comment, but the other thing that I wanted to say per that is that I think it would make sense for us to come up with some more, and I know you're working on this already, community resources so that everyone can get on the same page as far as what the science is and what the current guidance is and how that is evolving and changing because people are continuing to study it. And also, gosh, I lost my last point, but that's really what I wanted to say. Oh, and that we model continuous learning. We're all learning about this, and we're listening to people who are doing research, and research sometimes gives you new information. Sorry for the lengthy
we
thing.
can work on, Sarah, in attaching in the FAQ, because I know we're going to get through some of the questions at the end of the presentation, but I know we won't be able to answer everybody's question tonight. But we commit to having an FAQ to do that. In that we can place or add some links that speak to some of the research so that the community can have some of those resources at their fingertips.
For sure. So I think that frequently asked questions resource is going to be great for a lot of people's questions. So if your question isn't answered live, or if it isn't answered in writing or in the process of this, we will be answering the questions.
We'll be creating an FAQ, but we will get through several questions tonight, just so.
Sarah, thank you for raising that good point. On that point about learning as we go, you can see here enhancing disinfection of high touch points in bathrooms. We've learned over the course of the past several months that the spray of disinfectant and walking away and letting it actually dry and dissolve on surface tops is a more effective way to kill the coronavirus. Our staff will be implementing that, having learned that over time. Another great mitigator is obviously when someone is sick to stay home, and we're encouraging staff and students to take that action when they feel as though they may be not feeling well. What's great about the plan that the superintendent and others have talked about tonight is that our plan is fully synchronous. And so being home and not in person at school should not cost a student any lost instruction or falling behind. They will be with their classmates just virtually and being able to hear their teacher. No sharing of materials, no visitors to buildings. And Sandra, if you're on, you can say a word about the daily health screenings. She's been working closely with our Norwalk Health Director and medical advisor to develop a sophisticated health screen that parents would answer on behalf of their kids on a daily basis. Sandra, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you so much, Dr. Costanzo. The health screenings are also another point of controversy, whether temperature taking should be taking place, the testing of people, if testing of staff and students should be taking place, are all questions that have come up actually quite often. And the CDC guidelines are actually what we ground our protocols in. So the CDC guidelines currently have shifted slightly with the screenings and have made the screenings more self-reported, parents reporting how students are doing at home prior to attending school. And it will ask parents a series of questions that ask for if the child is having symptoms that we find are symptoms that present themselves with people that have COVID. The screenings that are done at the school level are going to be checking over that list and making sure that it's filled out and has been completed. Now, like Dr. Estrella said, as of today, that has been the language that has been shared with us, but those things have been shifting, and we're actually looking to have a screening protocol that's finalized when we get closer to reopening, because we want to make sure that it reflects the latest research and the latest recommendations.
Thank you.
I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Costanzo.
Sure. I can speak quickly. I know we're running low on time, but in priorities 2, which was the last screen, and 3, 2 really quick points that the district is looking at closely. It's the learning environment itself, and you can see here the response to possible exposure. And we've had the experience, fortunately, this summer to learn through some experiences. And I think, as a parent, the thing that I would want to hear most is that the employees of the Board of Education are in close communication and collaboration with our local health experts. And so I am on the phone almost daily, or the superintendent, or Sandra, our health coordinator, with our health director, advisor, talking through any individual situation or a general trend or pattern that we want to talk about and further refine. And you can see here that in the response to exposure, we're going to be providing our staff and our families with the ways to recognize signs and symptoms of COVID-19, a very quick and streamlined single point of contact process if a positive case is made. In other words, there are professionals and experts that are calling each other in a very thoughtful way so that we can quickly quarantine any individuals who might become exposed or who have had contact with somebody that's been a positive case. To go back to the earlier point, I think it's a very good thing to hear as a community member, to know that your municipality is working in sync with one another. And I think that has really been the case here in Norwalk throughout the duration of the pandemic, and will continue to do so as we reopen in the fall.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Costanzo. Just a point of quick question that I have. The questions that are in the Q&A, we are physically saving those questions, right? Somebody's grabbing those because
yes, because we're gonna do the Q&A at the end. We'll try to get to as many. I know we're running a little bit behind the schedule, so we're gonna post some of the questions live right after the last few pieces, and then we will save the questions to create a Q&A for those that we haven't been able to answer. Is that okay? Okay. So I'm gonna ask Ralph to speak a little bit about the technology and the work that we're doing to ensure that all students have equitable access to not only devices, but also broadband.
Yeah, so I'm going to speak very briefly tonight. So the three areas that we're really focused on from technology are obviously making sure that the middle section that you see there, that we have an area for students that are remote learners, that we have a depot where if there are issues that come up, they'll be able to contact their school. We'll be able to schedule a time so that we can keep social distancing in place for them to come down and get a replacement computer and get the support that they need. We're also looking at a new online support model that we've been trying over the summer, where it would be similar to what you're seeing right now, sitting in a Zoom meeting where parents will be able to log on. There will be a translator, there'll be an instructional person, and there'll be a technician on call to be able to answer their questions on a regular basis, to troubleshoot with them on whether or not they're having a problem getting to an application or whether they're having an issue with their computer. And then finally, we're also looking at making sure, I know the governor just made an announcement yesterday about broadband access. We're also looking at how we can expand that in the future. So I think there'll be more information for that to come in the near future, but we are looking to look at partners and making sure that all students have equitable access and very, very good access to the internet, which we know is important for all of our kids.
Thank you, Ralph.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of food services, we're going to, in order to ensure minimal contact, we're going to engage in grab and go breakfast and lunch. We're going to serve students in cohorts, and eating will take place in the classrooms or in outdoor and open cafe configurations at the high school level. In terms of cashless and touchless dining, we're looking at student scanned food service IDs and money added to online accounts or to the school office. And again, as we iterated earlier, in terms of health protocols, masks and PPEs will be available at all times, and staff will be assigned to cohorts to minimize cross-contamination, and meals will be labeled for those students with potential allergies. In terms of transportation, we're still working to define what the model is going to be with the state, but masks will be required. We're looking at loading the bus from the back up to the front and engaging in the reverse process in terms of disembarking. Students will be assigned in the order in which the stops are designated. In terms of the actual structure, of either 50% capacity or 100% capacity of the bus, or whatever the model will be, is still yet to be determined based on additional guidelines from the state, as well as the funding sources that will be available for us to add additional routes around our busing transportation plan. And we already talked about the re-registration. I want to reiterate the importance of this re-registration form, because it's really going to help us define our middle and high school model. So we really look forward to having the community support and telling a friend and making sure that everyone within our community completes this form. If you know anyone that moved into the community that's new, just making sure that you are a good neighbor in that sense, and really let them know about this form that needs to be completed so that we have accurate numbers in terms of student in-person enrollment. Now I'm going to turn it over to Brenda Williams that will read out the questions, and we will answer them as best as we possibly can.
Okay, we'll move through this quick. We have quite a few questions on masks and mask breaks, and also whether students will be required to wear them all day long. So Dr. Costanzo or Sandra, could one of you address that in terms of mask breaks?
Yeah, I could take a stab at it. I don't see Dr. Costanzo, so I'll take a stab at it. So currently in the ADAPT, Advance, Achieve guidance that's been provided by the state and the latest guidance in the CDC, the recommendation is that both staff and students wear masks all day. There are specific protocols that have been designed by the Health and Safety Subcommittee to provide students with breaks. Those include making sure that there's enough distance between students and that we're outside. It includes where to safely put your mask, how to safely remove it. So it's been a very thoughtful plan, but currently the guidance is that it is required for all staff and students.
Thank you, Sandra. While you're on, can you answer a question about temperature checks and health
Yes.
screenings? Will those be required? Will those be required? And are there any health requirements or any health screenings that parents or students or staff will need to complete before the start of school?
Well, there's all the health requirements that were required by the start of school. So those are still there, and we still need to make sure that we're compliant with the proper physical recommendations. And I wish Joanne Malinowski was here to expand on that. But as far as the health screenings that we will be conducting, the temperature requirement as of today are not required or recommended by the CDC. That's for the temperature taking. There is still a screening that they are recommending, and this is a self-reported screening or a parent screening that is done at home and that is brought in every day with the child. That is one thing that we'll probably finalize as we get closer to reopening, to make sure that we're in line with what the state is recommending, and more importantly, that our local health officials have had an opportunity to sign off on our protocols.
Okay, there's a couple of questions on the protocol if somebody tests positive in a classroom. So Sandra or Dr. Costanzo?
Well, a couple of things to talk about here. One is when we receive word of a confirmed positive COVID-19 case, understand that in most cases, we've already been made aware that somebody was not feeling well, or potentially, is in the queue to be tested or has been tested. So exposure tracing, which is a process of trying to identify individuals who may have come in contact with someone who is symptomatic, begins. And that positions the district in cases where the symptomatic person ultimately does test positive for COVID-19. Exposure by the CDC is defined as somebody that is within 6 feet of an individual who's tested positive for 15 or more minutes. If that criteria is met, for those individuals that have met that criteria, they go into a quarantine, and it's a 14-day quarantine. The COVID-19 positive person, believe it or not, actually quarantines for a bit shorter amount of time. The CDC recommendation is 10 days. So the district works quickly in consultation with our local health department. And through exposure and contact tracing, we quickly identify the individuals that need to be removed from the classroom and from the school, and for the adequate length of time. The other thing that I think is important for parents to know is if there's a student who's not feeling well, and it happens after the start of the school day and they've passed the health screen, and they weren't symptomatic the evening before, the school is taking quick action. The individual student is moved to an isolation room. Each school in the school system has a separate designated isolation room with a full apparatus of nursing equipment, and our staff are protected through the heaviest degree of PPE wear, and that individual will remain there until they can be safely removed from the school. And that allows us to protect the students and staff that remain in the building.
Okay, I know we're at the end of the time here, and as Dr. Estrella mentioned, we will follow up with FAQs and make sure that we're capturing all the questions here, but I know that everybody does have a big question about when they will get final information about what the start of the school year is going to look like. So I'm going to turn that over to Dr. Estrella to address and finish up.
So after August 7 is our deadline in terms of completing the reopening registration. Our goal is that once we have that information, the week of August 10, we will finalize our plans in terms of what the 6 through 12 models will look like given population size. And we will have another forum like tonight's to provide the final as final can be, and I'm going to reiterate that because, if the state decides to change something after that point, I want to be careful to point out that we will be as complete as any shift from the state let us be, right? So at that point, the week of the 10th, we can provide you with an update in terms of what the final model will be and how we will proceed moving from that point on, so that the community at large is clear about what pre-K to 12 programming will look like, and where we will potentially have students recited if necessary. That information will also be provided, because our principals are diligently working towards looking at their spaces and trying to maximize every potential space in the building to limit any need to have students outside of their current complex. So with that, I just want to say thank you for members of the board, for our mayor and other members of the panel for helping us engage in this conversation today. I wanted to thank all of our parents for taking the time to join us in this conversation. I know that we don't have yet all of the answers in terms of what the model will look moving forward, but we wanted to afford everybody in the community an opportunity to obtain an update of where we are in this process and what the work will look like as we continue to design the work for the fall of 2021. Again, thank you. And
Dr.
I'll turn
Estrella,
it
do you
over
mind
to our Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for all your hard work. And thank you, Dr. Costanzo, and thank you to Sandra Fayois and Dr. Myers and Brenda Williams and Ralph. I wanted to just say to everyone to reiterate that frequently asked questions from the chat will be addressed. And also, if you're looking for information, the best source of that information is to reach out to your school or to reach out to us directly. I think particularly now, people are very anxious and they're looking for answers, and it's very common for people to ask their friends, do you know about this? Do you know what's happening with this? But the best way to get accurate information is to reach out directly to your child's school.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that said, I want to wish everyone a wonderful evening. And again, thank you for your patience in this process. I know it's not easy as a parent myself. I know that this process is quite challenging. Having a child going to college and 2 children coming to Norwalk, like you, I feel the need, the intensity of the complexity of the work moving forward. But I believe that together we will make the best model possible to ensure that all of our children are safe first and foremost, and that they continue to receive a strong learning experience. So thank you and have a blessed evening.
Hey, Yvette. How are you? I'm reading your lips. You're muted.
That's a good thing. We're still being recorded.
I know, it's true. Yeah, no, I'm going to scoot off. I just wanted to make sure I don't have to do anything to save any of these questions, right?